In this video we're going to be looking at the mining boom and how changes in relative prices of commodities has influenced resource allocation. And if I was you, I reckon this is a really good topic to talk about whenever you get a question on relative prices, because it's a really clear-cut example. So what happened with the mining boom? So you can see the height of the mining boom was in 2011. Commodity prices were higher than they've ever been. They were massive. We were getting $150 per tonne of iron ore. And over the last 5 years, this price has gone down considerably. And into 2015, it's continuing to fall. Okay, how is the mining boom caused a change in relative prices and how that has influenced resource allocation? That is the key thing to talk about in this, when we're looking at the mining boom. So the large increase in the demand for iron ore and coal from China led to demand significantly outstripping supply and much higher prices. So China was growing through the roof. That was causing increased demand for iron ore, for infrastructure, for investment spending, and that led to massive prices for iron ore. So what happened? Well, mining companies started to increase their output as much as possible based on their spare capacity. So what they were doing is that they would supply as much as they possibly can. However, in the short term, the supply of most sought after commodities was relatively inelastic because of the long time needed to develop new mines to get more mining minerals out of the ground. So we didn't have the infrastructure, we didn't have the technology to get the level of minerals out of the ground that we wanted to. So that continued to be a shortage, and it led to massive prices for iron ore and coal. At the same time, the price of manufactured items was falling because of China's cheap cost of production, lower tariffs on Chinese products, and therefore there was leading to much lower prices for Australian manufactured products. So what happened was the relative price of iron ore increased considerably against the price of manufactured items. So the boom in iron ore's relative price demonstrates suppliers that it is now more profitable for them to shift as many resources as possible into iron ore rather than manufactured items. So what happened? And this process took about 5 years. More resources were allocated to expanding existing mines. Okay, we built new mines, we built new infrastructure, we built new machinery so that we could get as much minerals, many minerals out of the ground as we possibly could. Okay, it also led to the reallocation of labour, and this is a good example to use about how relative prices shift our resources. So what happened is builders, surveyors, engineers, truck drivers all started to apply for jobs in WA. It's a clear example of a reallocation of resources based on relative prices. So people that were working in the manufacturing industry decided to go over to WA where they could get $80,000, $90,000 a year despite having a lack of skills. So that led to a massive reallocation of resources based on relative prices, based on relative profits. And then what happened over the long term, because of all this infrastructure investment, all these new people working in the industry, suddenly we had excess supply. We were supplying so much that this price actually started to go down because we had a surplus. So what happened was partly because China started to grow more slowly, but mainly because we had an excess supply of these commodities, the price started to fall. And that has resulted in a fall in commodity prices since late 2011. So, to sum up, there was increased demand for commodities, and the reasons were increased growth in China. Demand outstripped supply, and we had a shortage. That led to a rapid increase in price. That led to an expansion in supply, okay, and resources started to get shifted away from relatively less profitable industries into the mining industry. And the long-term improved profitability in the mining industry saw new entrants and increased capacity. Lots of people joined the industry to get more minerals out of the ground, and this eventually led to increased supply and lower prices globally. So if you've got a question, explain how resources are allocated in a competitive market with reference to the recent mining boom in Western Australia. This is the question you're going to be doing in about 30 seconds. What I want you to do, define what is meant by a competitive market and what is meant by relative prices and the price mechanism. And then explain how resources were reallocated based on the mining boom. You don't need to talk about how they've slowed down in recent times, just what happened at the height of the mining boom. Here are some keywords to use. Have a go at this question. Okay, now what's happened in the last 5 years? Okay, what's happened is the global supply of minerals has increased. So not only are we supplying more minerals, other countries are also supplying more minerals. And this has led to a dramatic fall in the price of iron ore. Increased supply and reduced global demand has led from iron ore prices going from $150 to $50 a tonne. So how's that going to affect how resources are allocated? Well, resources are now being shifted out of the mining industry. Okay, there's lower wages on offer. There's high unemployment in the industry. It's something about 16%. Okay, so people were going to start to move out of that industry. There's And mainly there's less investment spending. There's less resources, capital resources being produced, being dedicated to the mining industry because it is less profitable. And partly because we have all the investment that we need. We have all the infrastructure we need to get the minerals out of the ground. So resources are starting to get shifted out of the mining industry because of the lower relative price. Where are these resources going? Well, the good thing about the lower commodity prices is actually leading to a depreciation of the Australian dollar. And we'll learn more about this when we look at macroeconomics. But the lower value of Australian exports has caused the dollar to depreciate, and that's increased the demand for a lot of other industries in Australia. So it's increased international demand for tourism and education because it's now cheaper for people to come to Australia. So that means that we can charge them higher prices when they come to Australia. We can increase, there's more demand for hotels, more demand for tourists, tour guides, and therefore resources are starting to get shifted back into these industries because self-interested producers know they can make a profit, and therefore resources are being shifted back into these industries. So that's an example about how the end of the mining boom has affected resource allocation in Australia. And again, is looking at how resources are allocated in a perfectly competitive market based on profit motives, and how the signals of lower prices is now telling producers to shift resources back into other industries, back into industries like tourism and education, because that's where they can get the higher relative price. That's the end of that video.